The Mig-29SMT brings some more fuel into War Thunder. Let's check it out. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, its successor states were often left with large numbers of MiG-29 aircraft as the backbone of their various air forces. Without the Soviet defense industry in operation, updates to the MiG-29 were much more sporadic than earlier Soviet aircraft, and often involved only a small batch of fighters operated by an individual country, rather than a new model entering a fresh production run. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Russian Air Force found its large fleet of MiG-29s were aging rather poorly, mostly due to inadequate maintenance, and they were quickly becoming obsolete. Well, they were looking for a way to both extend the lifetime of their jets and also upgrade the capabilities. The 917 specification that eventually became the Mig-29SMT was originally envisioned to establish a baseline set of upgrades and repairs that would be backwards compatible to most of the earlier model MiG-29s that were in Russian service, and bring them all forward to a modern, common level of performance. The new specification featured additional fuel in a fuselage spine, an upgraded radar set with notably better performance, fresh new engines, some minor interior structural changes, a huge expansion in compatibility with air-to-ground weapons, and an optional air refueling probe. The cockpit was also updated to be a bit more modern in terms of its layout and control setup, and the first flight of an upgraded MiG-29 SMT took place in late 1997. Production and deliveries of the SMT model have been a mixture of upgrades to older airframes, along with some newly built jets, and have proceeded kind of sporadically in low-rate batches since the early 2000s. Operators of the plane include Russia, Syria, and Yemen, with Algeria having ordered some, but later they rejected delivery after a big scandal revealed that they included faulty parts. The total production run is kinda hard to estimate, with some primary sources saying that less than 40 have been manufactured in total, while others have claimed well over 150 being built as of early 2023. What we get in War Thunder is the Mig-29 SMT, a jet fighter in rank 8 of the Soviet tech tree at a battle rating of 12.3. This jet has a ballistics computer with all of the usual top-tier features, as well as a helmet-mounted targeting system that can control your IR missile seeker and your radar targeting frame. Plus, it carries the SPO-15 radar warning receiver. This is, frankly, a very dated receiver compared to how new the rest of the jet is, but it still provides basic threat detection at fairly good range. It also carries the N010M radar set. This radar has multiple pulse Doppler modes, track while scan, pretty good range, multiple ACM boresight frames, and fairly decent target tracking. As of making this video, this is the best radar set available in the Soviet tech tree, and it gets the infrared search and track. For loadouts, the jet has a fairly comprehensive selection of air-to-air missiles, guided air-to-ground ordnance, rocket pods, and dumb bombs, something for every mission. For air-to-air missiles, it gets all 4 versions of the R-27, the regular and the upgraded E models. These are pretty good medium to long-ish range weapons with 35 Gs of pull and fairly solid tracking. You get the infrared and semi-active radar versions of the missile, both the baseline and the upgraded models, though you can only carry 2 at a time. The star of the show, however, is the R-73. This is an all-aspect infrared missile with 40 Gs of pull available basically right off the rail, insane off-boresight targeting, and electronic countermeasures. As of making this video, this is the best infrared missile in the game by most metrics, and once you get good instincts for what shots to take, this thing is going to get most of your air-to-air kills. For anti-tank weapons, you get the CAB 500 KRE TV-guided bomb and the KH-29TD missile. The KH-29TD is very long range, but really both of these weapons hit pretty hard and are completely viable for close air support. The flight performance of the Mig-29SMT has a lot of quirks and caveats. The main thing to know, coming up from the earlier Mig-29, is that the SMT is a tad bit heavier, carries heavier weapons, and more fuel weight, but it's got the same engines. This isn't some crippling problem, but if it feels like the jet is a tiny bit more sluggish in low energy states, or that its turning circle is slightly less tight compared to the earlier Mig-29, it's not you. Now, with that said, the plane is still fully competitive with other top-tier jets in Rank 8. Its acceleration isn't quite as strong as the F-16 or earlier Mig-29, but on its own, it's still respectable, and it has a pretty good rate of climb and a very high maximum speed. In terms of dogfighting agility, the SMT's in a weird spot. As I mentioned, it's a very slight downgrade from the previous Mig-29, and both of them had their flight models changed pretty recently, so it might get updated again in the medium term. So the exact numbers for raw turn rate, G-loading, and sustained angle of attack and stuff may change at some point. For now, your flight tactics will largely depend on your opposition. Against jets with beefier thrust-to-weight ratios, horizontal maneuvers are probably going to be a better bet, and trying to set up an overshoot will be your go-to move. Against more evenly matched opponents, basic air combat maneuvering will be the name of the game. One last thing to know about, like the earlier Mig-29, the SMT, with an upgraded pilot, turns and handles better at supersonic speed and retains more energy in maneuvers above about Mach 1.1 than almost anything else currently in the game. It's almost never going to make a big difference or anything, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, don't get the wrong idea though. For optimal turn performance, you still want to be at medium speeds. It's just that the SMT doesn't lose as much at high supersonic speeds. Taking the Mig-29 SMT out in air battles is going to be pretty familiar in the early stages of a match, presuming you've focused on air combat. Your R-27ER can occasionally score you some easy BVR kills during the early game, and both the ER and ET are very effective in a tail chase due to their really high speed. A note about the R-27ET though, some of its range is a bit wasted. It's got enough thrust and range to fly much farther than the IR Seeker can actually lock targets in head-on situations, so it's going to be ending up as more of a medium to short-range missile, like the regular R-27T, but it is still a solid upgrade. The R-73, and the fact that you can carry 6 of them in a dedicated dogfight loadout, makes this jet pretty dangerous to anything that's even close to being in front of it within 3 or 4 kilometers. It's got ECCM, but it's not immune to flares, and it doesn't seem as resistant to them as the 9 Mike is. But I expect the performance of the R-73 is probably going to change a bit over the next few months as people whine and complain that it needs a nerf or that it's not strong enough. Either way, it's incredibly effective at close-up dogfighting and can get you some crazy off-bore sight hits. In terms of ground attack, the SMT can take plenty of bombs or rocket pods, and it's got a full ballistics computer, so if you want to use this to take out a base or mop up AI ground units, you can, but there are better planes for that. One thing the SMT does pretty well, though, is close air support. The KH-29TD is an excellent long-range TV-guided missile with a huge warhead. But just remember that if you take a crazy shot from like 15 to 20 kilometers, it's entirely possible that your target might get killed or move behind cover before your missile gets there. The CAP 500 also does pretty well, especially if you want to live dangerously with low-altitude combat, and it's pretty easy to target from the external view. Overall, this is a pretty good multi-role jet for close air support that can defend itself in air combat and take out ground targets. Visually, well, the Mig-29 is generally a pretty badass looking jet, but the two paint jobs you get for this thing are just awful. You get a Russian one and an Algerian one, and both of them are frankly kind of horrible to look at. Hit up War Thunder Live and find a custom skin. Landing the SMT is really easy. This jet's landing gear is pretty tough, and you can drop it down at over 600 kilometers an hour. Landing flaps can go down a little over 500, and the plane has a drag chute, so overall, landing this jet is a lot easier than most other high-tier planes when they come in hot. Now, the cockpit gives some reasonably good visibility in most directions, and it's got two huge MFDs right on the console, as well as a useful heads-up display. But I found that some of the analog instruments tend to be in weird spots flying in VR, and if you're used to the earlier MiG-29, it's going to take you a little while to adjust to the SMT's cockpit. To close out on the Mig-29SMT. This jet has incredibly effective air-to-air missiles. It's got a good radar set with an infrared search and track unit. It carries TV-guided weapons for close air support. It's got tons of fuel, and it has really good supersonic performance. However, its radar warning receiver is a generation out of date compared to most other Rank 8 jets, and its overall flight performance is a slight downgrade from its predecessor in the tech tree. The final verdict on the Mig-29SMT is that this jet is a perfectly credible top-tier multi-role fighter. It can do air combat and ground attack with very effective weapons for both. The F-16 will usually outclass it just slightly in a one-on-one fight, but if your air combat maneuvering is good, it's still a perfectly capable dogfighter in most situations, especially with the new R-73. As always, thanks for watching.